Welcome everyone. Today I'm going to talk about Azure Event Hubs. My name is Riju and I'm a cloud solution architect reporting to Microsoft UK working for large enterprise customers on their cloud journey focusing on Azure. So what I basically wanted to talk today is about an understanding of Event Hub and how you can use Event Hub to build a solution. So that's the whole idea. So let's see what Event Hub really means. So I extracted this information from the Azure official documentation to understand what this really means. So this says in the documentation that a big data streaming platform and event ingestion service, which essentially translates into that you have a lot of data to be transferred into something, right? And if you think about any data warehousing solution or a database, a relational or NoSQL, they itself is a system on its own. So if you are ingesting the data to, let's say, a relational database, a lot of validation, etc., needs to happen, might slow down the whole process. Whereas your data massaging can happen later point in time, but the whole intention is to capture the data as soon as the data is available. And later point in time, let's see what we can do with the data kind of approach, right? So if you think from that perspective, let's say sensors available in a large building, there are thousands of data, millions of record coming in every moment you can think of, right? How big that building could be, and that the data will be very large. So if you are dealing such a scenario, then this is the solution which helps you or enables you to dump the data as soon as you have the data with you, and later point in time run some third party thing or something like which to read the data from that dump yard and then process it to your data warehousing, make it a reportable data, or figure out what are the challenges you have with those sensor data. Do you need an immediate attention, etc.? So that's the kind of second step, but we are focusing on the first step here. Now, a couple of features I wanted to highlight about Event Hub. Now, you imagine that you have to build something like this kind of solution. You can do that without Event Hub today. Now, if you to do that, you have to manage the whole infrastructure of setting it up and doing it by yourself. Now, what Event Hub, or especially the Azure Event Hub, really offers is that it offers a fully managed platform as a service, essentially, which means that the infrastructure management part is kind of taken away from you. So you don't have to really worry about the infrastructure part of it. It's gone. It is having a real time and a batch processing option. So if you have lots and lots of data and you are not really worried about the real time processing, you can do a batch. So you can say that every 5 minutes, I want to collect all the data and then push it to something else, right? So that kind of, depending on what kind of model you want to adopt, you can take it. And then you have that long-term retention policy if you want to retain that data for long-term reporting activity. So for example, in a building, you have 100 lifts, and out of that those 100 lifts in this month, the problem with 10 of them, and you want to capture the data and keep it for some audit purpose later point in time because other data are not so important. So you can filter them out and then put it into like something like Azure storage, data warehousing solution, or in some NoSQL storage like Cosmos DB, right? So that's a kind of long-term retention because Hub will have a limited capacity, so you might need to clean it up time to time. You might need to refresh it for the new data to come in. So that's what the long-term retention policy says about scalable. The bigger your application or the scope becomes, the larger the event hub needs to be. So that's the reason you need to have a scalable option available. And scaling for an event hub is just a matter of slider. So you have a slider, you can just slide up and down or right to left, and then it becomes huge. So it is no additional deployment, no additional, let's say, reconfiguration of that sort, which can have a downtime, etc., is just a scalable solution. So you can imagine how easy it could be to become a flexible solution. Now, the ecosystem, where then you can definitely understand that Event Hub is not just about dumping the data. And even if you have to dump the data, how do you dump the data? Imagine it's a sensor. Now it's a sensor. How do you connect that sensor? How do you build that small piece of code, right? And then you can think of programming languages which can help you do that. So if it is a system which supports .NET, Java or Python, you can do that. If you do not have any of the support, think of like a JavaScript which can run on a browser like scenario, and a small JavaScript engine can run, Python can run. So, and also the developer ecosystem which you have today is in your organization. So, and based on that, you will choose the programming language. So it gives you an option to pick up from an available possibilities. So that's the rich ecosystem we talk about. And we need SDK. So I'll show you in a demo how that SDK looks like in a .NET specific, but you can write that in any of the programming languages you can see in the list. We have premium and dedicated SKU. So if you want to have a most reliable, highly available with more powerful event hub capability, you can go for premium and dedicated with an additional cost. Definitely it comes with a cost. So you will be able to identify the business need and the requirement, and based on that, you can go with the premium or dedicated SKU. Coming to the next point, which is the edge solution. So when you think about having the same application running not just in Azure, which is a public cloud, but also in your private cloud in the edge scenario. Think of like a air turbine in a remote location, middle of the North Sea. Now you do not have, let's say, a connectivity back to your cloud that's strong. Maybe you're using satellite connection, and it's costly as well to keep a connection all the time on for a longer period of time. So what you essentially can do, you can have an edge solution like Azure Stack HCI available, which can have the Event Hub as one of its services in Azure Stack. And then you can deploy the same code and connect the devices into that same Event Hub. And that Event Hub will process the data probably once in a day or twice in a day, depending on how frequent you need that data, to the actual public cloud storage, that is Azure Storage or Azure SQL database, available in one of Microsoft's data centers. So sort of like a hybrid model, right? Depending on scenario. Deep sea um, while extraction can use that capability. You can use it in a remote location. You can use it places where you do not have good internet connection to connect back to your public cloud. Now, just to give you an idea how the event hub may look like from a architecture perspective internally within Azure, is that think of it like you have a lot of information in these green boxes. Now we're connecting the Event Hub either by using HTTPS or AMQP protocol, or you can even use the open source Kafka protocol, and then connect them back to those Event Hub. And Event Hub does allow you to provide you the partition. So which means that you have got partitions available which can tackle certain kind of data. So you say that for this location, I use partition one, the location two, I use partition two, something of that sort. So you can think of this partitions as your kind of temporary storage location grouped together depending on the nature of the work. And when the final consumer consumes that data from the Event Hub, they can target the partition. They don't have to run any kind of filter out of those large amount of data set, and then point to a partition and then can say that, hey, you know what? I want to go ahead and read from this partition one, because that's what I'm worried about, or my job really requires, or this application requires. So you can choose the partition from a consumer perspective when you are reading the data from a large event hub data set, right? So that way you're already filtering the data while storing it. Now while retrieving, you don't need to do the filtration, and you can just quickly do that activity by yourself. So that's kind of helps you achieve that. Now let's see a small demo on how we can create an event hub in the Azure portal. And there is a link here which helps you create the sample code, which you can run in your local machine using Visual Studio Code, which I'm going to show you also, and then consume the data or push the data to the event hub. So let's see that one by one. So if I now go back to my browser, let me just switch to the browser. And you should be able to see my browser in a moment. And if I may go ahead and then say I want to create a resource. Now, when I say I want to create a resource, I want to say I want to create a resource group. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. And then I'll say RG Azure PaaS. And I just pick the East US and I create. Pretty straightforward, creating the resource group, and it got created within a second. And inside this resource group, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and create an event hub. Okay. Sometime, yeah, this works a bit different, but we got the event hub, right? So you can see that it's a Microsoft Azure service. So you should identify like what kind of service you're choosing. So if you find the event hub, you can find that there are multiple different solutions coming from the marketplace by the word event hubs. And then there are Apache Kafka from Confluent, is a SaaS solution. There are Microsoft Databricks, which is also Azure service, but from Microsoft. And then there are Sentinel and all these things. So we are not interested about all of them, but we'll pick this one, which was sort of like which what we want to create. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and select the event hub and then create it within the same resource group, which I just now have created. And this has a uniquely identifiable name. So whatever name you specify should be unique across all Azure subscription available today. So it basically creates a DNS entry. So I say WGAZ PaaS E hub, sort of like to identify, and it is unique. So how it has to be, because nobody probably ever thought about it. Now these are the pricing tiers available. We talked about premium, and there was something called dedicated, right? So you have the standard. I'll go for basic because this is just for demo, and it will save a lot of money. Won't spend a lot from my pocket. Now you see here that it just needs this much information for the simple event hubs to get created. So I have created the event hubs, and it's going to take some time. While it is going to take some time, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open my code. That's Visual Studio Code. And I'm using for .NET, but you can use it for JavaScript, Python. You can use any editor. So there is no hard and fast rule for you to really work on a specific thing. So let me see if that opens. Okay. Now I'm going to share you this code, which essentially it looks like when you use the event hub. I'll walk you through this code very quickly for you to understand how this overall thing looks like. So you can see that I'm using one of the other event hubs which I created in this subscription. And I created a shared access key for this application to access my event hub. That's what you need to do to enable that event hub to be accessible by an application. Now, why shared access key? Imagine that you have hundreds of sensors, and then you have provided this connection string through your vendor, and you terminate the contract with the vendor, that but because the connection string remains, you still have they still have access to your event hub which you want to get rid of. So you can go ahead and create another shared access key for the new vendor and then delete this shared access key so that nobody has access to your event hub. So you can control that behavior in a much more DevOps manner if you have to onboard and offboard a certain setup applications depending on their nature of work, and then what they want to do and what kind of access they might get and all these things shared access key definition would tell you, or while you configure the shared access key for event hub will help you do that. And then you can see that event hub name, I'm using something else that's not relevant here, but what is more important is that I have two methods. One is to read the event and another is to publish the event, right? So if I focus on the publish the event for the first time, what I'm doing here, running a loop of 10,000 times. I can increase it, but while I'm running them, I'm just creating a message called event number and whatever that current number is. So it starts from 0 to 10,000, so it will create this string every time it comes inside that. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm building the event data with the string I've just populated and dumping the event into an event hub, right? So basically, I can go ahead and use this producer, that's my event hub producer, and send async and pass the event batch um, as a together as a message, and then it basically creates a batch of 10,000 records, right? So that's what I'm doing, and then closing the producer, and I'm coming out. That's what how publish. So when you are sending the sensor data, you might not be doing a pub batch thing. You're probably doing every time, so you just remove this batch part. But you can send the data in the simple code like this. And if it supports .NET Core or .NET 6, um, and then you can just simply add that. And when you basically have to read that event hub, when you store the data, you come into this read event. I try to make it as simple as it can be. And then you can see that what I'm trying to do is that I'm just trying to establish this consumer group connection string and event hub name and build something, an object called consumer, right? And using that consumer, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to get the data for a partition. So I'm going to go into each partition and get the data, right? So and just say that maximum events I'm going to read is 2000, and then I just run that. So if I may run this, and if that event hub still exists, right? And you will be able to see that it's going to go ahead and let me go ahead here. Now you can see that it's writing, right? So there's some activity happening. And then once it is written, it basically reads that data. So there are two steps happening. First, it is writing, and then second, it is going to read that. So I just made a lot of numbers. So it's kind of reading only 2000 record because that's what I defined as a max one. So you can think of like this is kind of uh, doing that right here. So I can even make it a bit more thing like effective here. instead of that, let me. So you can see that it's just wrote few and then retrieve few, but bit more quicker because I'm not going to write 10,000. So you can just alter the way how it you want and what kind of message you want to do that. So you basically get the sense that I'm now able to do it. Now let me go back to this and see that resource, right? And what I'm gonna quickly show you is that I'm gonna go to the shared access policies of the newly created Event Hub, and then I say add. And if you say send and listen and new poll, just the name of the policy, and you go ahead and create this. Okay. So when you do that, go ahead and create it. The policy will get created and will reflect. And if you come over here and there will be a connection string available. Okay. So you just copy the connection string. Remember the uh, event hub name. How do you remember the event hub name? It's the name here. So you'll find the event hub name. This is the event hub namespace, but I just go ahead and create a new event hub, new hub under this namespace partition count 2, message retention 1, and then I say create. So you essentially got a event hub. Within the event hub namespace, you got a subscription shared access policy, and I just copied the policy from the policy. So that's a new poll, and I say that I copied this policy, and I go back to my code base, and what I can do, I can say string connection string equals to this, and I just maybe I go ahead. And then here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add the event hub name. So what I essentially can do, I go here, check on the event hubs here, and then get to know new hub. So I'll say new hub. Okay, that's the thing I am going to do, is that there should not be any error. Okay. And then if I go ahead and run this .NET code, there is some error at the line number 13. So let's see what is that error. So this is this newly inserted connection string. So if I go to the end of this string, semicolon machine. Now let me run this. And it is writing. That means that's fine. Just to test that it may not write if you have mistyped anything. Let's say that event hub doesn't exist, so it won't work. Just to prove that, because we don't have a browser to see. So it is just not working, right? So you can see that it is not giving me any output because that doesn't exist. Same thing applies when you change something in the policy name, let's say pol2, it won't be able to connect. So if it cannot connect, it won't be able to write it. So imagine that the code which you're vendors which you have terminated your contract with are using, and you change the policy, delete the policy, or recreate the keys if the keys are compromised, and you don't want to change the shared access key, you can recreate. So regenerating the key will help you also save something. So it's trying, because there are retries available. Retry is, by the way, a feature available with um, all the all the REST-based API connecting to Azure. Hope this was helpful, and I could go on and on and on, because the event hub is really something which you can build a real complex big data streaming solution. But I want to pause here, and I want to thank you for all your attention. And just remember this page where you get all the samples which I have used, so you don't have to copy them. So it's in the GitHub official Microsoft sample page containing the GitHub samples for you to create something by yourself to be able to interact with the Event Hub through programming. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day.